Biography of Pythagoras. Why was Pythagoras famous? 570 BC 495 BC Pythagoras of Samos was an Ionian Greek philosopher, mathematician, and father of the Pythagorean Brotherhood, whose religious nature, but also the origin of principles that influenced later philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle. He was born on the island of Samos on the eastern coast of the Aegean Sea, near present-day Turkey. He is believed to have traveled to various countries, including Egypt, in search of knowledge as a child. Moved to Croton, a Greek colony in southern Italy around 530 BC, and established a spiritual and philosophical fraternal community there. His followers followed his prescribed restrictions and learned his philosophies. This community continues to influence Croton's politics to their own detriment. At one point their meeting places were burned and Pythagoras was forced to leave Croton. He is believed to have spent his last days in Metapondum, another place in southern Italy. Pythagoras was one of the first mathematicians of ancient Greece. This outstanding mathematical genius was probably born in Samos, a Greek colony of Loin on the west coast of Asia Minor in 584 BC. It is known that in 525 BC he settled in the city of Crotona, a Dorian colony in southern Italy. Here he lectured on philosophy and mathematics. His lecture hall was always full of enthusiasts. Many of the upper classes used to come to listen to his lectures. At that time women were forbidden to participate in general meetings, but the presence of women in Pythagorean meetings was noticeable. A follower of Pythagoras was Theno, the beautiful daughter of Milo, whom he later married. She wrote her husband's biography. Unfortunately, it was later lost. Pythagoras opened a school in Magna Graecia and many students flocked there. The influence of the great teacher Pythagoras on the students was so great that the students there gradually turned into a fraternity among themselves. They became known as the Order of the Pythagoreans, i.e., servants of Pythagoras. Pythagoras in mathematics. Pythagoras contributed greatly to numerology and three-dimensional and area-related geometry. At that time, it was the practice of the fraternity to believe that all inventions were Pythagoras, so it is impossible to say with certainty who invented each of the theorems. They laid the foundations of mathematics through geometry but failed to explain the irrational numbers, and Euclid brought these others' inventions to Alexandria and published them in his book Elements. Although Pythagoras was known primarily as a mathematician and scientist, the earliest evidence suggests that he was not famous for mathematics or science either in his time or in the 150 years after his death, even in the time of Plato and Aristotle. He was then known, firstly, as an expert on the fate of the soul after death who thought that the soul was immortal and had several successive reincarnations, secondly, as a scholar of religious rites, thirdly, as a magician who had golden thighs and who lived in two places at once. May have, and fourthly, a strict lifestyle with dietary restrictions and ritual observances and strict self-control as his father. It is difficult to determine which are the works of Pythagoras and which are the works of his successors. However, Pythagoras is considered to be the father of theories about the importance and function of numbers in the material world and in music. It is debated whether he thought about cosmology like other pre-Socratic philosophers and whether he can really be called a mathematician. The earliest evidence suggests that Pythagoras envisioned a universe based on moral standards and numerical relationships. This is very similar to the ideas found in Plato's cosmogony. He was very interested in the relationship between different numbers, the classic example being the Pythagorean theorem. But he does not seem to have proved this theorem. Perhaps the successors of the Pythagorean philosophy are its true exponents. These successors took their master's cosmology in a more scientific and mathematical direction, notably Philolaus and Archytas. Pythagoras presented a relatively optimistic picture of the soul after death and offered a way of life that was able to appeal to many because of its rigor and discipline. He is said to have been the first to claim himself as a philosopher or lover of wisdom. He was the student of Pythagoras. Although Pythagoras is known today primarily as a mathematician and scientist, the earliest evidence suggests that he was not famous for mathematics or science either in his time or in the time of Plato and Aristotle a century and a half after his death. Pythagoras was the father of mathematics. He is a mathematician, thinker, and philosopher. Born in 570 BC on the island of Samos on the east coast of the Aegean Sea, near present-day Turkey. He has a keen interest in learning since childhood. He believed that knowledge is not complete with any one guru. The wealth of knowledge is spread all over the world. So he traveled to different countries including Egypt in search of knowledge.